The sun hadn't fully broken over the water when I pulled up to the beach house. The tide was low, the shoreline a quiet stretch of gray and soft foam, just like the morning I first signed the papers decades ago. The salt in the air still bit a little at the back of my throat. Peeling paint curled at the window frames, the porch light flickered even though I hadn't touched the switch in months. This was the kind of silence I used to welcome, back when peace didn't feel like exile. I bought this house to grow old in. I wanted to die here, maybe, quietly, with Evelyn, back when that was still possible. But now, I'm standing on the porch of a life that someone else seems ready to sell off like junk at a weekend yard sale. Inside, the living room held onto echoes. Her favorite chair was still there, faded blue upholstery and a small rip at the seam she never let me fix. A photo of us sat angled toward the sun on the fireplace mantel. Evelyn's handwriting still clung to a sticky note by the phone. Buy jam. Silas likes strawberry. Silas was 5 when she wrote that. He's 15 now and taller than me. I wasn't angry. I hadn't felt that kind of heat in years. What I felt was compression, like the world had steadily closed in, speaking over me, around me, until I became furniture in my own life. I walked slowly down the hallway. That's when I noticed them. Boxes. New. Unfamiliar, labeled in Vera's handwriting. Guest towels. Silas. Books. Upstairs closet. Next to the stairwell was a suitcase. Samsonite. Black. Worn handle. Luggage tag that didn't belong to me. It sat like it had always been there. Like I didn't. I opened the fridge out of habit, then froze. A calendar note stuck to the freezer door. Move-in week, final decision. My fingers hovered over it. Not my handwriting, not my plan. They were making decisions, without me. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I'm not in the habit of starting fights I haven't mapped out. Later, I walked into Evelyn's sewing room, or what used to be. The lace curtains were gone, replaced with a bland set of beige drapes. The cabinet where she kept her fabrics had been moved. A standing mirror leaned against the far wall like someone had already claimed the space for something new. I found a plastic storage bin on the floor, labeled with a strip of masking tape. Dad's stuff. That was me now, a category, an afterthought. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I lifted the box, felt the bottom sag slightly from the weight, and carried it to the hallway. No one needed to see it, but I needed to feel the heft of it. That was my place now. Upstairs, I returned to the master bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer. I reached for the pocket watch. It was Evelyn's wedding gift to me. Gold-plated, still ticked when wound. Every morning since she died, I'd turn that knob 3 times. Just like she used to remind me, time, Lex, never let anyone steal it from you. I turned it now, once, twice, 3 clicks. The sound filled the room more than I expected. Maybe I wasn't done yet. Around 3, I heard the front door open. Gideon walked in like he'd lived here his whole life. Vera trailed behind him, already on her phone, motioning at the movers like she was directing traffic. Silas wandered in last, earbuds in, nodding to music I couldn't hear. Dad, Gideon said flatly, we'll sort things upstairs later. That was the greeting. Vera glanced into the dining room. We'll need that space cleared before Sunday, she said to no one in particular. Nobody asked me if I was staying. They just moved through the rooms like they belonged to them now, like I was the tenant whose lease had quietly expired. They brought in takeout for dinner. Chinese. The table was set for 3, Gideon, Vera, Silas. No chair for me. I pulled one from the corner and sat down without comment. Vera talked about our new beginning and finally making the coast property livable. Gideon nodded. It'll be good for Silas. Vera said, Dad will be fine. He doesn't need much. I chewed my food slowly, swallowed hard. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was planning. After dinner, the house settled into soft creaks and distant footsteps. I sat in the living room, watch still in my hand, until I heard Vera's voice through the wall, muffled but clear enough. Once we finalize the sale, he'll have to go. He won't fight it. I closed my fingers around the watch. They think I won't fight, but they've never seen what I protect. Morning came without color. The sky hung low and gray, and the house felt colder than usual. We sat at the breakfast table like strangers forced into routine. Gideon sipped his coffee in silence, face buried in his laptop. Vera scrolled through her phone like she was managing a stock portfolio, not dismantling a life. She didn't look up when she said it. We spoke to the agent this morning. The buyers want to close by Friday. I didn't flinch. I reached for my mug, held it steady. Buyers? I asked. Simple. Flat. She smiled like it was a good thing. Yes, it's moving fast. Don't worry. We'll help you pack. Help me pack. In the same breath, she'd just sold the roof over my head. Gideon didn't add much, just nodded like it was a done deal. That's what stayed with me. That nod. They mistook my calm for consent. A mistake. On the kitchen counter sat a manila folder. Label read, Pending Deed Transfer. I'd seen enough in my life to know that phrase means unfinished business. I didn't touch it, but I memorized it. After they left for the grocery store, I climbed the stairs. There was an old filing cabinet in the office I kept locked. I still had the key. Nobody asked. Nobody cared enough to check. The top drawer stuck a little, like always. Inside, the original deed. My name, my signature, notarized. The date was clear, nearly 20 years ago. Evelyn had insisted we keep 2 copies. One for peace, she'd said, one for war. I found Vera's version in her tote bag the night before, left unzipped beside the couch. It was half-filled, unsigned, undated, a bluff dressed like a plan. I scanned mine, uploaded it to my cloud storage, then again to a backup account. I wasn't going to lose this house because someone thought I'd forgotten how to be sharp. That evening, Gideon walked into my room with a beer in hand. He didn't ask if I wanted one. Hey, he said, standing by the doorway like it was some casual chat. Vera gets worked up sometimes. You know how she is. I didn't respond. He kept talking. We're just trying to make things smooth. No drama, right? Thought maybe. If it's okay with you, I mean, you could stay with us for a while. Got that extra recliner in the den. A recliner. After a life in this house, they were offering me a chair in a corner like a guest. He chuckled softly. It's just till we get everything sorted. Silas'll love having you close by. I nodded, let him hear what he wanted. But my silence wasn't surrender. He left after a few more empty reassurances. I closed the door gently behind him. Then I copied the deed twice. One I slid behind the framed photo of Evelyn in her old room. The other I placed in a box marked winter coats and stashed in the attic. Later, I sat at my desk and wrote a short email to Roy. He used to be a bulldog of an attorney before he retired. Once told me, if you ever get cornered, send me facts, not feelings. I attached the scanned deed, no explanation, just the title, for when this gets messy. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. The deeper they dug, the clearer their intent became, and every move they made was just another admission. Around 10, I stepped into the hallway to turn off the light. That's when I heard them. Silas whispered, "Is Grandpa really okay with us moving in? He looks sad all the time." Vera's voice, calm and certain, cut through the wall. "He won't say no. He never does." I stood there in the dim hallway for a long moment, fingers brushing the edge of the wall. "No, Silas, I haven't said no yet, but that silence is about to end." They asked me to drive Silas to school the next morning. Vera handed me his backpack on her way to the porch, barely looking up from her phone. "We're on calls all morning," she said, "and the movers are coming later. Could you just manage him today?" Manage him, as if my grandson were another errand to run. Silas slid into the passenger seat, quiet at first, fiddling with the zipper on his jacket. We pulled away from the house, the mist clinging low over the coastal road. Neither of us spoke until the silence got too heavy. "Grandpa?" he asked gently. "Why don't they want you in the new house?" I kept my hand steady on the wheel. The question landed differently than anything his parents had said. Honest. Unfiltered. "Sometimes," I answered, "grown-ups make decisions they believe are right. It doesn't always mean they are." He nodded, staring out the window. A child shouldn't have to ask that. At the next red light, I glanced up. There, across the intersection, a billboard read, "Elder Rights Property Fraud, Know Your Legal Line." It felt aimed right at me. Before the light turned green, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I put it on speaker. Roy's voice came crackling through. "Lex, listen carefully. If they're bluffing a sale, freeze that asset now. Quietly. Don't warn them." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He knew I heard. When I returned home, the house felt more foreign than ever. Boxes had multiplied. Cabinets stood half open, shelves missing familiar things. I went to the den and reached for Evelyn's gardening books on instinct. Comfort, I suppose. One slipped open as I lifted it, and something fell into my palm. A bookmark. Her handwriting. "They'll smile at you while measuring your coffin." I remembered the night she wrote that. We'd argued, not loudly but deeply, about trust, about Vera. "She smiles with her mouth," Evelyn had murmured. "But watch her hands, Lex. Hands tell the truth." I sat down, pressing the bookmark flat on my knee. Evelyn saw what I refused to see. That was the betrayal beneath this, my own blindness. I opened a fresh notebook and began to write. Dates, phrases, incidents. Roy had told me once, "Judges don't read tears, they read records." So I wrote. Every word was fuel. A knock came mid-afternoon. I expected a delivery man. Instead, it was Joy, the mail carrier who grew up with Gideon. She hesitated before speaking. "I've been hearing things, Lex. People saying you're selling the beach house." I shook my head once. She shifted uncomfortably. "My dad." My cousins pushed him out after his stroke, moved his chair to the garage, told everyone he preferred it quiet. Her eyes met mine. He stayed silent too long. When he finally spoke up, they called him bitter. After she left, I didn't move for a while, just stood in the doorway, feeling the echo of her warning settle over me. Silence wasn't dignity anymore. It was surrender. By dusk, I had already emailed Roy the photographs. Vera's falsified transfer folder beside the authenticated deed. His reply was short. "Good. Keep everything. Let them keep lying." I installed 2 cameras, one in the hallway, one over the front entry. Not to spy, to remember. I gathered Evelyn's letters, her recipe box, and placed them in a metal lockbox tucked beneath the floorboard in our bedroom closet. No one was erasing her. Not here. Dinner smelled of reheated pasta. Gideon was in a good mood, careless, chatty. Vera was on her tablet, eyes bright. They talked about backsplash tiles and open-concept kitchens, like contestants on a home makeover show. "After this closes," Gideon said between bites, "we'll have the new place ready for Thanksgiving. Vera wants custom cabinets. Finally host the holiday right, you know." I set my fork down gently. "Funny," I said. "Evelyn always believed a house chooses who gets to carve the turkey." He glanced up, the faintest crease in his brow. He'd heard something in my tone he didn't expect. He looked up, finally realizing I wasn't playing along anymore. The coffee was hot, the conversation cold. I sat at the end of the table, buttering a piece of toast, while Vera talked to Gideon like I wasn't even in the room. They were already discussing paint colors and marble finishes for their dream kitchen, like the ink had dried on something I'd never seen. I cleared my throat and asked, "What day exactly is the move?" Vera didn't flinch. She looked up from her phone with a thin smile. "Tomorrow. Thought you knew." Right then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down at the message from Roy. "Escrow account was never opened under your signature. That's suspicious." So that's it, I thought. She didn't just overstep, she forged. Something bigger than I'd guessed. I nodded slightly as if I understood and took another sip of coffee. Let them talk. Every word was another card face up on the table. After breakfast, I grabbed my keys and told them I'd be out running a few errands. No one asked where I was going. I drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel, pulling into the county records office half an hour later. Inside, the building smelled of paper and old linoleum. I waited patiently until the clerk called me up. Mr. Ramsey still worked the front desk. She squinted at me before smiling faintly. "You're Evelyn's husband, right?" "Still am," I said, my voice even. I asked for a certified copy of the property title. She typed a few keys, then printed the record. "Still in your name," she said. "That's not changed." "Could I also get the notarized authorization my wife signed before she passed?" I asked. She nodded, moving slower now. When she returned, she handed me both documents. As I slid them into a folder, she leaned in and said quietly, "Lots of families come through here fighting over the dead's leftovers. Yours ain't the first." That hit deeper than I expected. The truth always does. But I didn't say a word. I just nodded and left. Back home, I headed to Evelyn's study. It hadn't been touched much. Too many memories packed into too small a space. I began reorganizing the drawers, clearing off old envelopes and half-used pens. And then I found it, tucked behind a stack of gardening magazines, sealed with her handwriting across the front. To whoever stays. I sat down and opened it. Her words were quiet but firm. If you're reading this, it means something's gone wrong. Don't let them fool you into fading away. Don't be afraid to be the storm if it saves your peace. I didn't cry. Not this time. I folded the letter, placed it in the fireproof box with the deed copies, and closed the lid with care. She saw this coming. She knew I might have to finish the fight she never got to start. That night at dinner, the energy shifted. I waited until midway through the meal when the air felt just casual enough to cut through. I said lightly, "You might want to double-check those sale documents." I noticed a few discrepancies. Gideon dropped his fork. Vera paused, her mouth still but her eyes moving fast. I kept my tone steady. "You wouldn't want to commit accidental fraud, would you? These things have consequences. No shouting, no warnings, just facts. Let them chew on that with their lasagna." I stood and walked out of the room, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any words could have made it. Later that night, near midnight, I couldn't sleep. I was sitting up, reading Evelyn's letter again when I heard Vera's voice through the thin drywall. "No, she knows something. I don't care. Just get it done before she acts." She thought I was asleep, thought she was safe behind that wall. I sat up straight in bed, pulse steady. If they wanted a war, they should have read the will first. That morning, I stepped into the kitchen to find Vera spread across the counter, flipping through a binder titled Holiday Guests 2026. Gideon hovered beside her, nodding at entries. Silas sat at the far end of the table, stirring his cereal without meeting my eyes. They spoke about Thanksgiving. "At our house this year," Vera said, as though the word "our" included me naturally. I looked at the list on the counter. So many names. Friends, neighbors, co-workers. Mine was there too, but under Dad, not Lex Radcliffe. A name card lay nearby. Dad, scribbled in pen as an afterthought. I touched the paper. That moment was removal dressed as inclusion. I stood quietly. They didn't notice. Later, Vera passed by me in the hallway. She muttered loud enough to brush my ears. "He should be grateful. Most parents don't even get a spare room." It stung more because it was casual, delivered like a real estate appraisal. I stepped closer quietly. I looked her in the eye and said, "You don't own enough gratitude to speak of it." She froze. The contempt in her tone flipped. "You're living on borrowed time," she spat. I looked back evenly. "Borrowed implies ownership. You have neither." She blinked, taken off guard, not by volume but by the calm in my voice. She realized in that moment that my silence wasn't weakness. She mistook it for acceptance, but I wasn't silent anymore. I left the house and walked down to Wyatt's fishing shed on the bluff. The wind off the ocean stung my face. Wyatt was mending nets. He looked up before I reached him. He set his tools down. He didn't need to ask. "You're hurt," he said simply. I told him. I laid out how they were stripping me of respect, property, history. He nodded, quiet. "I had a sister like that," he said. "She lost everything trying to be kind instead of right." I leaned in. He added, "A knife in the back hurts less than one disguised as a gift." I laughed darkly because he was right. I said softly, "They're selling the house." He paused, then spoke with weight. "Not if you still hold the nail." He stood, placing a call. "If you need me, I'll come. I'll be your witness." That handshake meant more than words ever had. Back home, we were nearing dusk. I cleared the dining table of mail, attended to the lockbox under the bed, made sure the hidden deed pages remained tucked. I printed copies of the documents, backup after backup. I moved the birth certificate and vet's records from the drawer they'd been forced into years ago. I told Roy, "This is no longer about sentiment. This is protection." He answered with agreement. "Collect everything. They're going to need a storm to drown this." Around 10, I walked into the living room. The front door was open. Vera had shown up. Not just her, two sharply dressed people followed her in. Buyers. She led them through rooms I built. Walls she said would come down. Furniture she suggested would be cleared out. They moved through silently. They assumed my absence. I stood behind them, my voice soft but firm. They were planning my departure, while I was preparing their reckoning. Whispers followed me that morning. I passed the porch and heard Vera, soft voice but loud enough, telling a neighbor, "He's been forgetting things lately. Not safe alone, you know." Gideon nodded nearby as she spoke. My name, spoken like I'd become a diagnosis instead of a man. I didn't stop. That's what they counted on. The silence. Later at the post office, Mrs. Delaney asked me quietly, "I heard they're going to move you into care soon. Is that true?" I looked at her steady. She caught the edge of pain in my eyes. I smiled with control. If I'm going anywhere, it's court, not care. The implication hung between us. Rumors like these are fuel in their war. They attack reputation when facts are still buried. I walked away, but I carried it all with me. Each murmur, every glance, proof in how they maneuver. I was home when Roy showed up, posing as a courier, a harmless delivery man with a clipboard and a quiet nod. He handed me an envelope, affidavit forms, case updates. We sat at my kitchen table side by side. He spoke low. "Gideon requested power of attorney last month. Without your knowledge." My stomach sank. He laid out copies, transaction logs, notary stamps, signatures that didn't match. He watched me absorb it. He said, "I recommend we file a cease and desist on elder exploitation," quietly but decisively. I nodded. He produced a notarized letter, a statement declaring I retain full ownership and legal capacity. He filed it with our HOA contact list. My heart changed direction, from defense to offense. Later that evening, hunting for a VA benefit card in my secondary file box, I found a voicemail from Evelyn. Her voice sounded younger, familiar. "Don't let silence be your legacy. Speak, even if they won't listen." The line crackled, but the words reached me. I saved the file on my guided recorder and marked it for court submission. I realized they didn't just underestimate my paper. They underestimated my ability to use it. At dinner, I brought up a local news article, estate fraud cases on the rise. Vera leaned closer. I said, "You know sons have gone to jail for rushing inheritances?" She froze like she'd swallowed poison. Gideon's silence was louder than her reaction. I didn't need to scream. They were now responding to my questions, not dismissing them. The shift was mine, psychological victory. Later that night, I went out to the mailbox. One letter, no name, no return address. I pulled out a photograph. My medications, lined up like evidence. The note inside, "Care facilities take this seriously. Maybe they should know." I held it under the porch light, my pulse steady. They played intimidation, but I'd built a fortress in paperwork, truth, and preparation. If intimidation was their next tactic, I was already miles ahead. I woke before dawn. Light had just begun to stretch over the horizon. My alarms had been racing in dreams, eviction notices, forged signatures, empty rooms. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Vera's SUV sat idling in the drive. Movers unloaded boxes in the yard, more than was needed to pack. I dressed methodically in my study, shirt, slacks, jacket. I pulled my hair back. Everything felt like preparation for court, not home. Inside, I thought, they think I'm already beaten. They've underestimated how much calm a man can carry. I called for a family meeting in the living room. No more sneaking corners or silences. I sat at the head of the table, Vera and Gideon across from me. Roy joined via speakerphone. Neighbors tuned in by video link, faces small on screen. I began low, deliberate. Roy took over. He presented copies of forged transfer documents side by side with my originals. Vera tried to interrupt, but he held the timing tight. Gideon sputtered denials. Vera's face reddened with each slide Roy showed. Then Roy brought out the power of attorney file under Gideon's name. "This is entirely forged," Roy declared, showing mismatched signatures, timestamps that didn't match county records. The notary was discredited. Vera's jaw went slack. Gideon stuttered over excuses of miscommunication. Their strategy unraveled publicly. I leaned forward, voice calm. "If you continue like this, I will use every legal tool available." I felt the weight of every eye on me, but I held them steady. Silence pressed. I stood. The room held its breath. I picked up Evelyn's farewell note from the table envelope she'd addressed. "To whoever stays." I read a line. "Don't let them fool you into fading away." Their eyes flicked from Roy's charts to me. I walked toward them, then backed away, commanding the room without shout. I said, "This house never left me. It's time you learned that." My tone wasn't loud, but it carried. Gideon glanced at Vera, then back at me. He tried, "You didn't let us pay you. You refused settlement repeatedly." I shook my head slowly. "I was protecting what was mine. You were trying to steal what I built." His lips parted, but no words. In that stillness, they finally understood. Silence wasn't my defeat. It was my strategy. I woke before the sun touched the windows. No alarms, no birds, just a stillness that told me this was the day. I brewed coffee, slow and steady, while my printer hummed quietly beside the kitchen table. Stacks of documents laid out in perfect order, deed copies, Roy's affidavits, notarized witness statements. I checked each one, slipped them into 2 manila folders, one for the court, the other, public release. Then I opened my laptop, typed up a press email. Subject line, "Elder deception in coastal towns." Underneath, I typed the first sentence without shaking. "They tried to erase me from my own home. This is how." I sat back. No fear, no second guessing. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. And the truth, it didn't need to shout. But today, it would be heard. Late morning, Vera and Gideon returned with a man they called the inspector. No uniform, no ID badge, claimed he was assessing structural safety. I stepped aside, let them roam freely, and recorded everything with a phone in my shirt pocket. They moved through the house like it was already theirs. I noticed how the inspector avoided eye contact, scribbled notes too quickly. Then, by the back porch, he muttered to Gideon, "The buyers won't like that wall." He froze as I stepped closer. "Buyers?" I asked. He blinked. Vera's mouth parted, too slow to interrupt. I pulled out a printed set of ID verification forms and offered it toward him. "You work with which agency again?" He didn't answer. Gideon snapped, "This is standard, just a precaution." "No," I said. "Forgery and manipulation aren't standard, son." I turned toward my camera, made sure it caught every word. Roy filed the cease and desist that afternoon. Elder exploitation, attempted fraud, false agency access. A copy hit the HOA board and another spread through email to every homeowner in the community. I didn't need to say a word. The response came without prompting. By evening, I had texts from neighbors who hadn't spoken in months. One from the HOA president read, "We had doubts. Thank you for clarity." I sat on my porch reading each message slowly. Vindication hadn't come from a judge, but it had arrived. I wasn't alone in this anymore. The air inside was charged when I walked in. Vera stood in the kitchen, fists clenched. "You'll regret embarrassing us," she hissed. I shook my head. "You embarrassed yourselves. I just made it visible." Gideon stepped forward, voice shaky. "We'll sue. You can't humiliate family like this." I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped Evelyn's voicemail. Her voice played through the speaker, low, clear, unshaken. "They can't take what's inside you, but protect what you've built." Her words hung in the air. Neither of them moved. I walked back to the study, sat down at the computer, hovered my finger over send. No second thoughts. The subject line was bold. How they tried to sell my life without me. I clicked. The story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd been silenced. The morning light came over the water, soft and gold, like the whole town had taken a deep breath overnight and finally let it out. I sat by the window with a fresh cup of black coffee, no papers on the table, no documents waiting to be signed, just quiet, real quiet. Then came the knock. First it was Tom and Marianne from across the street, then Angela with flowers, a stream of neighbors, some I hadn't spoken to in years. They brought muffins, stories, soft apologies wrapped in nervous chuckles, and behind them, Mrs. Langston, the retired judge from 2 blocks over. She held out her hand, then pulled me into a hug. "Your silence wasn't weakness," she said, calm and certain. "It was strategy." Later that afternoon, Roy handed me a sealed envelope. Found this with the last of Evelyn's old files. Inside was the deed, revised and notarized months before all this began. Her private trust had secured the house for me indefinitely, airtight. I could see her signature, sharp. Intentional, She knew. Roy looked at me, grinned. They can't take what was never theirs. I nodded slowly, letting that truth sink in. Not just about the house, but everything it stood for. Around dusk, I heard a car pull up. I opened the door before the knock came. Gideon stood there alone, hands in his pockets, eyes puffy and red. He didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me like he wasn't sure if he still had the right. "Dad," he finally muttered. I lost track of who raised me. And why that mattered. I didn't answer. Just walked back into the house, opened the old photo box, pulled one out, him at 7, soaked from rain, clinging to me like the world had ended. I handed it to him. "That boy knew love," I said. "Find him again." He nodded, didn't speak again, just walked back to his car. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. 2 days passed. Vera never showed. Not for apologies, not for damage control. Just gone. A suitcase missing, her car gone. On the counter, she'd left a single line on a torn piece of paper. "Good luck with your memoirs." I shredded it. Roy leaned against the wall, watching. "Guess she won't be starring in your next chapter." We both laughed. First time in a while. It felt earned. By the weekend, the house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. I had reclaimed it, wall by wall, word by word. I sat at my desk, opened a new browser window, and started a blog post. The quiet power of legal ownership. I linked to every elder protection resource I could find, quoted legal experts, dropped in a few of my own lessons. Then the messages came in. A woman in Florida, a retired vet in Oregon, a school teacher in Kansas. All with the same kind of story, different names. Your voice gave me courage. I read every one of them. Slowly, I leaned back in my chair. The world hadn't changed, but I had. And maybe that was enough. Roy popped his head into the room. "I booked us 2 weeks, somewhere sunny, somewhere that doesn't have a front porch battle zone." I stood, grabbed my jacket, walked to the door. Before stepping out, I turned back to the house, whispered, "You're safe now." As we drove off, windows down, sun warmed through the windshield, I realized something I hadn't been able to say for months. I had just sold my silence and bought back my life.